Welcome into episode 359 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, when it rains, it pours, and it was pouring last night in Nashville. So let's get right into the good, bad, the ugly, and by that I mean the ugly.
I don't know. Celtics looked good.
You just took my opening shift.
At least
you just poached me right off the get-go. We're not even like 30 seconds into this. Oh my god.
At least we have one team going.
I'm done. I'm leaving, guys. I'm sorry. I'm out.
Well,
what a jerk.
While you get your you get yourself together, Bridget, I'll kick us off with the opening shifts. And yeah, I just think obviously the results aren't terrible as it pertains to what it could be. We're not talking about an 0-7 team. But obviously we've been talking about the process, and the process didn't look much better last night in Nashville. And I guess my initial feedback is there's just a major disconnect, at least visually, from what we're seeing between the players and the coaching. And I'm not talking just Jim Montgomery. I'm talking the entire coaching staff, but because he is the head coach, he is going to be the face of the coaching. But it's also the players, and coaches can only do so much. And they just look lost out there as a team. They look confused. Their team game is as bad as I've seen it for a stretch like this in a very long time. When you talk about the discipline that I'll hold off on, the being out of position, the lack of team speed, so many areas that they're lacking in. And my question is why? Why is there such a disconnect between the players and the coaching, and why does the team as a whole look the way that they do? And I know adversity is something that in the regular season eluded Boston, certainly 2 years ago, and at times last year, and adversity can be grown from if used properly. But, just judging the games in front of us right now, they look lost, and I'm not so sure why. We can break it down, but they just, for a team that has gotten eliminated twice in the last 2 years to the same team, it started on opening night with me to come out flat against that team in that moment when they're raising the banner. I'm questioning where the urgency and the hunger is, and you can be hungry and urgent and still be working out kinks, and it just seems to be all lacking right now.
Yeah, I'm still mad at you, Scott, by the way. So my real opening shift, besides the Celtics are off to a great start, is that the Bruins made some lineup changes in their forward lines last night, and they really, I don't know if you guys agree, it didn't really work. Obviously, they weren't able to score. So and we had talked about this last podcast, like, do you leave the top line together, switch them up in game? How long do you stay with them? Well, they did not stay together for the game in Nashville. Marchand moved up. Zaka got moved to what they're calling the third line, though I think I would probably call that the second line with Patra and Geeky. But so the lines that they had, I looked at them before the game started, and I was like, okay, well, that's not a winning formula for lines. Jones, Coyle, Frederick was not a fan of that. If that's your second line, you're just not set up for success, I don't think. And then the only line they kept together was the fourth line, deservedly so. And they weren't able to score the way that they'd been scoring in Nashville either. So my question is it chemistry? Like, Brian, you're like, why is this happening? What's the reason for it? Is it just that there's so much personnel turnover that the chemistry is not there yet? Is it as simple as getting more games together, it will start clicking better? Maybe that's what the Bruins have to hope for, that it's something that builds as time goes on, because all of those lines have someone different on them that wasn't on the team last year. I also was not impressed with Jones' game again, and I think we can talk about whether or not there's maybe somebody in Providence that could come in that would be a better option in the middle six than Jones or Tufte, who have been the guys that have been plugged in. And no update on Tyler Johnson yet either. So just kind of wanted to throw that out there because the rotating the lines did not work in Nashville. Maybe there's another solution.
Yeah, and Max Jones ties into my opening shift, which is this is just an undisciplined hockey team right now. They are taking way too many penalties, 6 more minor penalties on Tuesday. And Jones comes back into the lineup after being a healthy scratch and immediately takes 2 penalties in the first period. Neither one necessary, like neither one a quote unquote good penalty. Second one was especially bad. Just he loses the battle in the offensive zone and then just trips the guy. And Predators scoring that power play to make it 1-0. David Pastrnak took a silly, lazy hooking penalty 13 seconds into the game. That's his 5th penalty in the last 5 games. Like, just an individual level of undiscipline that we're not used to. David Pastrnak, generally a pretty disciplined player, doesn't take a ton of penalties. All of a sudden, he is. Nikita Zadorov has taken a penalty in every game so far. He leads the NHL in penalty minutes. Took another one Tuesday. Like, and I know Zadorov is going to take a lot of penalties. He always has. But it can't be every night. This can't happen every single game. Charlie McAvoy loses control of his stick, high-sticking double minor. Technically, the Bruins kill it off, but the Predators score 2 seconds after it ends. So essentially, that's, for all intents and purposes, a power play goal. That makes it 2-0. Like, they have so many issues in terms of personnel, lines, all the stuff we're going to get into, not generating enough offense. And then they're hurting themselves so much more by taking all these penalties and constantly putting themselves on the penalty kill. Statistically, their penalty kill has been solid. I think they're 9th in the NHL. But they've just been on it way too much. And it kills any momentum. It prevents you from getting momentum. It gets guys out of rhythm. I mean, David Pastrnak ended up playing 16-18 time on ice last night. That's largely because the Bruins spent so much time on the penalty kill that he's not out there. So, like, you're on top of all your other problems, you're compounding it by being an extremely undisciplined hockey team.
Yeah, the Bruins already have 100 penalty minutes.
Yeah,
which is the most in the league. It's crazy. 100 penalty minutes in your 7 games into the season. I know some of them are fighting, but it's still you don't really want to lead that category. That's not one that you want.
right. And so I would say two of the small areas where I thought the Bruins had showed positives last night was fighting, which is what you said, Bridget. Credit to Mark Kaslick for trying to spark his team early. And then when the Bruins were on the penalty kill, I know Yossi scored on the Max Jones one, but with the amount of time that they were in the penalty box, for the most part, I thought they did an okay job a good job in a penalty kill. Obviously, the goal was right after McAvoy's double minor. So the penalty kill, they shouldn't have been on the PK as much as they were, but when they were, I thought the PK was okay to good, and I thought the power play, despite not breaking through, I thought they generated more looks than we've seen in a while. So I guess those are some special teams play, I guess, was maybe a positive, but I want to peel back a little bit on the word undisciplined, because you see it thrown around so often. A team is undisciplined. But what I want to talk about right now is why a team is undisciplined. And what leads to undisciplined play, in my opinion, is a team that is chasing the game and they're behind the play. They're being reactionary as opposed to being assertive. And when you have the puck and when you're moving your feet, well, you're not going to be undisciplined because you're going to be the one drawing the penalties. And I feel like I don't think an NHL team enters a game being like, let's be undisciplined. It's a byproduct of chasing the game. And you talked about Pasternak's penalty, Scott. How do you start a game after 2 days off with the narrative being what it is around this team, and you're riding a guy with you're being dragged by a player, by hooking him to start the game? It's like, David, move your goddamn feet. This is exactly what we're talking about. Move your feet. He's lazy in that moment. He takes a hooking penalty 13 seconds in. That he's supposed to be your leader, one of your leaders. Charlie McAvoy. Stop doing what, albeit other people in the league do, which is they slow down when they think they have an icing call. Don't expect an icing call and stop skating. Keep retrieving the puck until you hear the whistle. For the most part, I'm realistic, and I understand that like a lot of players do that with the new icing rules. But you know what I'm trying to say? Like, just don't anticipate that all the time. Like, have some better sense of your surroundings and understand that, hey, if they wave this off, I'm flat-footed now. And so that led to him taking that stupid penalty. Max Jones, everybody's been talking about online, and we'll talk about him here too. So it's just, yes, there'll be penalties where you'll sit there and say that's a bad call by the ref. But by and large, a team that has 100, would you say, Bridget, 100 penalty minutes?
100, yep, exactly 100.
So when you're the team that has 100 penalty minutes through the first handful plus of games in the league, in the season, and you're leading the league in penalty minutes and minors, well, that to me is a microcosm of their entire game, because they're playing slow, they're playing reactionary, and they're chasing the game. And teams that chase the games take undisciplined penalties because they're not moving their feet.
Yeah, exactly. And Brian, you brought up that the Kastelik fight, and it was a good job by him, but the several minutes after that, I just had me shaking my head, and I was like, that they don't have a chance tonight. Like, that this is just going to be more of the same. I just want to run through what happened. All of this happened within 4 minutes of the Kastelik fight. Charlie McAvoy held the puck while drifting backwards through the neutral zone. Way too long, didn't make a play, and then fumbled it away. Morgan Geekie tried playing a bouncing puck in the neutral zone with his stick instead of getting his body in front of it. Bounced over his stick, Predators took it, entered the zone. Hampus Lindholm threw a blind backhand pass up the middle of the ice for an unforced icing. Pasternak turned over the puck on an entry, trying to spin off a check, led to a 2-on-1. Pavel Zacha entered the zone, threw a backhand pass to no one, rushed the other way for Nashville. Charlie Coyle in the defensive zone, blind backhand pass in the middle of the ice, leads to a great scoring chance, bailed out by Jeremy Swayman making a save on Tommy Novak. All that happened within 4 minutes of a play that should have gotten your team fired up and engaged in the game. And I was like, that's it. Like, this is just how they're going to play tonight. And it barely got better from there. It's like they're just so off in like every respect right now.
I'm almost at the point where I don't want Kastelik to fight just because the team's better off with him on the ice. Like, the better off with the fourth line on the ice to try to like change momentum. Obviously, Kastelik is a good fighter, and that's one thing that he can bring if the team responds. But there was times where he's in the box waiting for the 5 minutes to be up, and like the lines are, the fourth line split up, and you're like, well, you know what, this could be a good time if Kastelik wasn't in there to have an energy shift right now, but nobody else on the team was doing it, like you were just reading through. Nobody was sparking anything in that 5 minute span that Kastelik was in the box.
Yeah, I didn't even realize Charlie Coyle played last night. Scott just informed me. Didn't realize he was on the ice. But that's kind of a cheap shot because, like I said, about a lot of players. So so Scott, you mentioned the turnovers, and when I watch the Bruins for the majority of the games that they've played so far, and again, I want to emphasize, obviously they played well against Montreal, but so is everybody. And I thought they played a strong competitive game against LA, and I thought obviously they played good, not great against Colorado, but it was a good win, right? On the road, Colorado was desperate, so I don't want to take those moments away from them. But by and large, I look at this Bruins team and I say, why do they appear so easy to play against right now? They are, as we documented in the offseason, the biggest and heaviest team on average in the NHL. And the response to my rhetorical question could be, well, because Brian, they're slow, so they're easy to play against because they're slow. And they have some players that aren't the fleetest of foot, and they're not the fastest team, but they have players that can move. And again, team speed is not just about foot speed. It's about decision making and all those things. So I asked myself, why is it that the Bruins just seem so easy to play against? They're so easy to break the puck out on, and they don't. And in the offensive zone, there's no extended zone time. Like here and there, you saw Marchand do it last night, but up and down the lineup, by and large, they're one and done in the ozone. Like there's no cycling, there's no, at least on a consistent basis. And I wonder, why is that? Like this team is not as bad on paper or on the ice as they've been showing. And Bridget, you mentioned earlier there's different faces in the lineup, but they had different faces last year too. They had a lot of different faces last year in the lineup. And I just feel like Charlie Coyle and Pavel Zacha entered the season knowing they had to be Boston's top, centers. And, Zacha's in the wing this year, and is Coyle a little bit not complacent, but just doesn't feel that same fire in his belly. I don't know what's going on, but the team, for their size and experience, is way too easy to play against right now, in all three zones.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you're right. Last year, they had a ton of turnover, and they came out of the gates on fire. And you're right, like just the way it looks. Last year's team looked like a team of a bunch of guys who had something to prove. Like they wanted to prove that they deserved their new spots in the lineup, that they were going to be okay after losing Bergeron and Krejci. And they played like that. They played like a team with purpose. And right now, it doesn't look like they have a purpose or like a common goal, or even individuals who are feeling like they have something to prove. And it's weird, because we haven't seen a team start slow in years around here. Like whatever else you want to say about Jim Montgomery, his teams have gotten off to great starts. So I know like people are, I've seen people online like ripping Montgomery for not doing a better job with training camp or getting the team ready. And it's like, well, like if you're going to do that, then you have to give them some credit for the past 2 years when they did start the season on time and looked ready right out of the gate. So I don't like it. You're now 2+ weeks into the regular season. So even if that was an excuse at the start, like it's not now. You've played enough games. You've been into the flow of the regular season long enough that like guys should be up to game speed. And yet it still looks like way too many of them aren't.
Well, I'll make this point. It's definitely, obviously the personnel has changed a lot in the past 3 seasons, but and they've been able to handle that differently better last year than this year. But where the positions did turn over, like when you have a different top line center, sometimes it takes time. Like having Elias Lindholm in that position, it could take time to build the chemistry with Pasternak. It looked like it was going to be there right away. It isn't necessarily there, I would say. And so that's definitely a position where it becomes more noticeable when chemistry needs to build. And that hurts the team more when it's not quite there to start the season. And the reason for that is because Lindholm missed almost the entirety of camp. So that's one guy that is behind, and hopefully and I know we're 7 games into the season now, but there's, that's still not a whole lot of time to get work with those guys. And so that's one of the reasons why I brought up chemistry in the beginning. Like, is this a chemistry problem? And I was thinking of Lindholm, and not that he's had a bad 7 games. I think on the power play, he's brought a lot. I thought that the first unit of the power play in all 3 of their full power plays against Nashville were actually really good. Weren't able to score. Saros was doing really well. But either way, that's one position where chemistry, there's more to be desired, and hopefully it fixes itself over time. The other issue is the other guys that you're plugging in are Max Jones, who I'm not sure anyone would say was a better fit for the team at this point than Danton Heinen was when he came in last year and was the new piece that they plugged in, and or like James Van Riemsdyk got off to a good start in Boston. It's obviously different players, and there's a completely, and then
that they hadn't even plugged in Danton Heinen yet, though. Like he was still, at this point, he was still sitting out, waiting doing the Tyler Johnson, waiting for his contract.
Was he really out for how many games was he out?
It was the 10th game
Was
that
the
he
10th
played.
Which just goes to illustrate how long the season is, and to kind of let listeners and fans know, like, it's okay to be pissed off and frustrated with what we're all seeing. We all here feel that same way. But when you think back to last year, you would think Danton Heinen was on the team all year. And to Scott's point, he wasn't even signed yet. And so it's a long season. So hold off on the panic button. But all of these points and frustrations that we're bringing up and question marks and concerns are valid until they're no longer. And it's not a guarantee that they will no longer be valid. But just to jump back quickly, Scott, when you mentioned, yeah, like the start last year, because like players had something to prove. It's almost like last year's Bruins team had, ironically, even though they were celebrating their 100th season, it's almost like there was like an expansion energy to them, where like you had players that kind of like were being doubted, like you're playing in a position that's too high in a lineup for you, like you kind of saw with like Vegas in their first year, where they were castaways, misfits, right? It's almost like that energy kind of galvanized the group, where it's like, let's prove people wrong. But Bridget, to your point about the chemistry with Lindholm and Pastrnak, and that needing time to grow, I agree with all of that. Unfortunately, the chemistry between them is like the last on my list of concerns right now, because it's almost like what I'm watching David Pastrnak solely a lot when he's on the ice, and it has nothing to do with any of his line mates or whoever. It just seems like there's like an MO issue right now and it starts with the leaders. I want to say, I think Brad Marchand was trying harder last night, as far as like effort and stuff. So I don't want to lump him into this, but Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak realize that they are the next wave of leadership on this team, even beyond Brad Marchand, but certainly replacing Krejci and Bergeron and Chara's presence. And there's a big weight on their shoulders for that. And they know this because you hear them say it in behind the B scenes and interviews and stuff, but they aren't showing it all the time. And a simple way you can show leadership is, would you ever see Patrice Bergeron bail out on a back check? No. And when you watch the Bruins play these teams in the early part of the season, it's relentless back check pressure. Like, the Bruins forechecking pressure is lacking, but the biggest thing to me is there's no back pressure. When their opponents are skating through the neutral zone, the Bruins, by and large, it's kind of just like lackadaisical. Would you ever see Patrice Bergeron stand up straight on a back check like you saw Pastrnak do a few moments last night? And I'm not trying to pick on him. It's fresh in my mind, and he's far from alone in this. And that's why it's like I'm just seeing there's an energy and a vibe to this team right now that is off. And that's why, to jump back to my opening shift, it's like I is messaging just not getting through? Or could you have John Tortorella or Bruce Cassidy or somebody like that behind the bench that's the anti-players coach that the Bruins have also had in the past, and they still wouldn't get the messaging through? Because is it something to do with something within these players, this leadership core, where they just the fire's not there right now, and that's on them no matter who the coach is? Because I know there is conversation about is Monty on the warm seat, and if this play continues, it's the nature of the business where, yeah, he will be on the hot seat, because you can't fire 30 players or 23 players. And I just don't think it's an encouraging sign that, Bruce Cassidy's style wore thin on these players, and then the Bruins go out and get the opposite in shoulder rub, player friendly Monty, and that messaging is not getting through anymore. And or I shouldn't say that, but early on, it doesn't appear to be. And so it's like, okay, what's the common denominator here? The core players that are still there. And I think I'm not trying to sound alarms and cause any pessimistic narratives, but it's just a conversation about what we're seeing right now.
And
Yeah,
you're
it's
also
like
twice as mad because they made you stay up past midnight to watch it. So
yes, if you're gonna get shut out
He's a little
the game that ends
cranky.
at 9:30, not midnight.
He's a little tired and he's a little cranky.
yeah, like they're not doing really anything that they want to do. Like when you would hear Montgomery and Sweeney and Neely talk before the season about the kind of team they want to be, it would be like, well, heavy, physical, hard on the forecheck, holding on to pucks in the offensive zone, pucks and bodies to the net, killing plays in the defensive zone with closing on guys quickly. And it's like pretty much none of it is happening. I think at times, like, killing plays in the D zone has been okay. But like the offensive zone stuff is just way off. Like, again, except for the fourth line, which has played that way consistently. Now, I didn't think they had a very good game Tuesday night either, but that's really the first time you can say that about them this season. So, like it's not on them at all. Other lines are playing like that every night, like aren't able to do what they're supposed to be doing. So,
and making a lot more money doing it.
Yeah, and to the idea of like, Bridget, you're right with some of the chemistry and guys who missed parts of camp and all that, but then I would also look at like, all right, well then what's the excuse for Pavel Zacha, Charlie Coyle, Morgan Geekie, Trent Frederick? Those guys all had full camps. They've all been in this system for multiple years now. Geeky for a full season last year, like, and they've all been quite. Let's just be honest, like they've been bad so far. Like, you've gotten Morgan Geeky still doesn't have a point. Trent Frederick and Charlie Coyle have 1. Pavel Zacha is 2. Like, so it's yeah, some of it is chemistry or whatever, but those guys all should be better individually. Like, they know what they're supposed to be doing. We saw it from all of them for long stretches last year, and they're just not doing it through 7 games.
Yeah, I think that the best way to describe those 4 so far have just been like unnoticeable, quiet. Like, they haven't forced their will. I mean, besides maybe on the penalty kill where Coyle has looked better and looked like his normal self on the penalty kill. I think 5-on-5, he hasn't been possessing pucks the same way. And Frederick too. Frederick can play that kind of game, and Frederick he's kind of a big body guy. Normally forces his way into something, but yeah, so far. And I will say, I haven't thought Zach has played terrible. Maybe of that group, like I don't think he's played terrible. He's quiet on the score sheet. Hit the crossbar yesterday against Nashville. I think he's come close a lot of times. I think he's still connecting on passing. There's still some aspects of his game that have been good, but not finishing, obviously, which is the issue. And the reason why they had to break that lineup and whatnot. But of those guys, I don't think Zach is off to a terrible start. Just point wise, doesn't look very good.
And I want to jump back to the line combinations because Bridget, you mentioned it earlier, and I come from the belief of I don't like absolving coaches from accountability and responsibility, but it oftentimes bothers me when I see, because I know that coaches most of the time are saying the right thing, and for whatever reason, the players just they tune them out, and I blame the players for that because they're professional athletes and they're the ones between the boards skating, and I don't like when players get let off the hook because the coach gets fired, and that's like, oh, they just needed a new voice, because that's kind of bullshit a lot of the time. It's not all the time is it bullshit, but it's coaches are scapegoated, and I don't like that. But at the same time, the line combinations that Monty keeps putting through the blender it's not so much that he's doing the blender, it's what he's concocting as a smoothie. So it's like, Scott, I know you mentioned they've been so anemic offensively that you didn't mind the blending before yesterday's game. And I don't disagree to that extent, but it's like, why? Like, do it with the third line. Like figure out that. I don't know why they went away from that Coyle, Marchand, Frederick line in Colorado. The last game they won, by the way, because it was the best that Coyle had looked and Frederick had looked all year. And I thought they played well. And then they just go away from it for 2 games and they put Max Jones in there. I just don't
Yeah.
I don't get it. Like you don't have to tinker everything just because you're tinkering shit. And I just think that there is something to be said about the constant line juggling. And I think that line juggling over the course of 82 games is beneficial for a roster because it allows players to get chemistry with different line mates, different teammates in case of injury or just a change of looks. But we're less than 10 games into the year at this point. It's just been like absurd the blender choices. Like it's confusing to me, and it clearly didn't work last night. It was brutal.
Putting Max Jones in your top 6 is just that's what I had an issue with. And I know they're trying to fill a gap that was left when DeBrusk left in the top 6, but that just was to me pretty obvious based on what Jones had done to this point wasn't going to help out that situation. And I know you brought up the penalty, Scott. Like obviously that's not helping him stay in the lineup. I don't know if I don't know what they do with him at this point. Do you guys care whether or not he's here, gone?
Yeah, I thought I have a little bit of a different take on this. Like I look at what Montgomery's doing, and to me, it's like a cry for help because he only has so many options right now. It's like, okay, so fine, he can sit Max Jones down again. Who are you bringing in? Riley Tufte, who also just keeps taking penalties every time he's in, or Justin Brazeau, who's slow and way off the pace this season. What are they solving? So, yeah, you could keep Frederick on that second line, but then Jones or Tufte has to go in his third line left wing, and it's at some point here, Don Sweeney has to give him a little more to work with, whether that's signing Tyler Johnson finally and seeing what that looks like, or calling up Fabian Lysell and giving him even if he didn't earn it in training camp, and even if he had a slow first weekend in Providence, he had a 2-point weekend this past weekend. By all accounts, played pretty well. Okay, maybe he's not 100% ready and fully cooked, done baking down in Providence. But I don't know. You got to try something. You can't. I just think it's fine. We can pick apart individual combinations that Montgomery's trying or that he's not keeping together long enough. I mean, he got ripped for keeping Marchand Coyle Geeky together for as long as he did. So he can't. When the personnel isn't there, you can't win either way. Either you give something a chance to figure itself out and you get ripped for sticking to it too long, or you change it up, after one game of it not working and you get ripped for not giving something a longer look. I think the bigger issue is what he's trying to work with, which is oh, all right, great. I'll keep rotating in Max Jones and Riley Tufte, and they'll keep taking bad penalties. And I don't know if, Brazeau, maybe he's just a slow starter who's going to take some time, but didn't think he's looked good. All these guys I already mentioned who are struggling. You tried healthy scratching Geeky, didn't jumpstart him. You got to give him something else to work with.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on that because it's not, it's not Montgomery's fault that his options to put next to a Coyle in this situation where he changed up the lines, his options were Tufte and Jones and Brazeau, and there was not an ideal option, and that's why you have to think, all right, well, maybe we're going to have to go outside what we thought when we started the season, and that could either mean Tyler Johnson or somebody from Providence, and that could be Fabian Lysell. And maybe it's time to give him a shot in the NHL, and it can be a short one if it doesn't go well. But I think currently it doesn't seem like what's up in Boston is the fix or is going to help solve some of the issues that Brian went over in good detail earlier in the podcast that they need to work on and that they're a little bit behind on.
Yeah, it's almost like you want to say there's so much that is going wrong right now that it's not an overnight fix. Oddly enough, sometimes when there's so much going wrong, sometimes one strong game and one strong win can just kind of turn it all around, because it's everybody just feels so much better after a good effort. So it's going to be a challenge tomorrow against Dallas and Boston. But if Boston can string together a really strong win tomorrow, they can start feeling better about themselves. But right now, as we're talking about, what are the lines? A lot are clamoring for what Scott mentioned, which is just, can we sign Tyler Johnson at this point? Can we call it Fabian Lysell? In order to do those things, to Bridget's question a few minutes ago, what are fans willing and what are you guys willing for them to do? What are the Bruins willing to do? Does signing Tyler Johnson and calling up Fabian Lysell require putting Max Jones on waivers or Riley Tufte or something? Is that what we're talking about here? And are you guys willing for them to do that? Certainly.
I mean, I think you pick one of them to start and you waive Riley Tufte. To me, that's a pretty easy one. Even if you're talking about signing Johnson, if you waive Tufte, you'll have about 1.1 million to work with. I don't know what Tyler Johnson is asking for a contract, so I guess in theory, like if he's looking for more than that, then that's not enough. But it would be obviously plenty to call it Fabian Lysell. So waiving Tufte is a pretty easy one for me. Like I don't think he's going to get claimed. Jones. Look, they had like a real vision in mind for Jones. I think they expected him to be a regular, and obviously he did miss time in camp with an injury. I'm probably not at the point of waiving him yet, and I don't think I want to waive Brazeau either because I saw enough from him last year that like I want to try to give him a chance to get up to speed here, but Tufte would be the easy one for me.
Yeah, I think that's where they're at right now.
So let me ask you guys this. Is there a situation where you could make the argument that Boston's roster right now only has one true first line talent, given Marchand's age and injury history and Lindholm's ability to have to prove it consistently with first line production, and Pavel Zacha, I think has a career high 59 points last year and a 57 the year before. So that's really good, but is that legit first line production? Can you make that argument that right now, not only is Boston just littered with third liners, it seems like, but they also are only boasting one true first line talent at this point in the season? At least
you definitely could. I think at the very least, what you could say is there's no second star that a lot of really good offensive teams have. Like obviously at like the very high end, if Pasternak's your McDavid, you don't have a Draisaitl. If he's your McKinnon, you don't have a Rantanen. Like, so in that sense, you can absolutely say there's no kind of second guy. I think most teams, Marchand would probably still be like their third best guy. Like he's right there. Or Elias Lindholm, like whichever one you want to bump above the other. So I think you have other first line talents. You just don't have that. You definitely don't have that second star of like another guy. Certainly not another 100-point scorer, but even another 80-point scorer. I think we all feel like Lindholm could get there, if things go really well. But I think we need to see that happen first.
Just to, again, because I know that a lot of these episodes so far, not just with the Skate podcast, but fans talking to each other out in the streets, other people who cover the team, haven't had a ton to say positively about this team so far, at least as it pertains to their in-game play, excluding the results of some of them. But yeah, I don't know. I honestly just forgot what I was just going to say. But yeah,
it sounded like you almost wanted to find a silver lining and then you couldn't.
I was trying to find some positivity for people. Oh, I remember what it was. Thank you. So Pavel Zacha, for some silver lining, and that just exemplified how tough it is to find it. Holy smokes. Last year, through the first 6 games of the season, Pavel Zacha had 2 points. He finished with 59. This year, through the first 6 games of the season, he had 2 points. Now 7 games, 2 points. All I'm trying to say is I know it's doom and gloom, but we do have to remember in the back of our minds that like it's a long season and everything is kind of magnified right now, but like, water does kind of, reach its level at some point, and like, there will be stretches of time this year where it's the opposite, where we're going to probably be saying, wow, the Bruins look unbeatable. I just want to kind of bring that perception back here for a second, because it probably seems super pessimistic, and that's just Zacha was the best example I could prove of, like, he had 2 points through 6 games last year. He ended with 59. Like, there's time. Like, the season's it's a long season is all I'm saying.
There you go. You found it. You got there eventually, with a little bit of an assist from Scott.
Oh my God. And now that's chemistry, right? When you've been on the same line for three plus years, right?
Kind of read your mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Knew where you were going.
Yeah.
He knew where you wanted to go on the ice, and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I do think Bridger was right to highlight, like, all the guys I was up. Zacha is the one who is at least doing some good things, and the points just aren't coming. And I remember feeling like that about him at this time last year too. Probably, I think he was playing even better last year. Like, that line was scoring. Like, I think, Brian, I don't know if you have the numbers, but I think Pastrnak was off to a pretty good start last year. So
he had 8 points in his first 6 games.
Yeah, so like that line was still putting up points. He just wasn't factoring in on the score sheet. But I remember feeling like he was playing pretty well, even though the points weren't there. And then sure enough, they started coming. So I don't think he's playing as well so far this year. But Bridget's right. He has had chances. He rang the crossbar last night. Maybe they start to fall.
Boros didn't get like the very tip of his glove on it. Like, he got like a tiny piece of it. Like, that was a goal. He had a breakaway that he definitely could have scored on. Like, I can think of some times where he could have scored that just didn't go his way that time. But
last night was comical, guys. It was almost like you kind of felt like it was rock bottom. Not rock bottom, but it was. I mean, you had David Pastrnak breakaways.
A lot of people do hit their rock bottom in Nashville.
Yeah, they do. That's true. But that's true. But you just got the sense, like, there was one point where there was a turnover in Nashville's D zone on a power play for Boston, and Pastrnak had like a 3-on-1 down low and had Martian backdoor, I believe, and it's a very lucky that the defenseman tipped it away. Like I said, Pastrnak toe picks on one breakaway, gets 2 breakaways in the game, doesn't score on one of them. Crossbars from Zacha. It just seems like right now everything that can go wrong is going wrong for them, which happens to every team at some point in the season. It just looks like it's happening to Boston early and often here. And again, what's the 3-3-1?
Marchand had a 2-on-1 and he puts it off Saras's arm. Like, had room up top to shoot, just didn't quite get enough under it. Yeah, I mean, there were some chances for sure, but even still, like, I feel like most of the Bruins' good chances came in the third period once it was kind of desperation time.
And I think that I was surprised that the power play didn't score with how well it was playing.
Yeah. I mean, so, like, I don't know. Maybe they didn't, quote unquote, deserve to get shut out, but even still, like, it's all right. Maybe give them 1 goal somewhere. Like, it's still not good enough.
It's not. It's a 4-1 final or 3-1 final or something rather than 4-0. It's still a loss.
We've done a lot of talking about the offense. I want to talk about the defense for a second here. Are you guys surprised as I am maybe at their inability to handle the forecheck with the puck moving and skating ability that a lot of the Bruins defenders have? I mean, Charlie McAvoy can skate. He can move the puck. Lindholm can skate, can move the puck. Lohrei can skate, can move the puck. Zadorov is a big body, but because of that, he has strides that can take up some space. He can move the puck under duress. Carlo, we all know, isn't the greatest puck mover, but again, when you have his size, his strides should be able to get him back in the D zone to retrieve pucks. And then Peake's, he's been fine, honestly, for what his skill set is. But are you guys surprised that the Bruins they're making the dumbest of the decisions, and also just speed wise seems slow back there?
Yeah, it feels to me like this is where if there's an element of overthinking, like, this is where it's showing up the most. It's almost like they don't know like what their simplest option is as they're coming back on the puck, and they're like trying to figure it out once they have it, and you're just under too much pressure in the NHL to be waiting to figure out what you're doing with it. And yeah, like I mentioned, like Hampus Lindholm and unforced icing, just backhanding it to no one. And like honestly, like all things considered, that's a better result than turning it over, which they've also done too much of. But yeah, like you know, McAvoy, you mentioned he clearly expected an icing. So like he wasn't prepared there, and then he takes a penalty. I mentioned on the last podcast, I think Mason Lohrei has really been struggling under forechecking pressure, and I thought that was the case again on Tuesday. He had another bad turnover right to the middle of the offensive zone that led to a grade A chance. Yeah, it's like I don't know if they need to simplify things. Like, hey, like all right, here's a real simple like I don't know, give guys two options, either brim it around or bump it up the boards. Like whatever it might be, because right now it looks like they're coming back on pucks. They're trying to turn up ice and like find a cross ice pass. I don't know how many passes Zadorov has had coming out of the zone that have just straight up missed guys where it's like, you know, where like he doesn't know exactly where people are or where they're supposed to be. Maybe they're not where they're supposed to be. It just looks very off.
I feel like defensemen are petrified to go off the glass now because they want to try to avoid that delay game penalty too in the D zone.
Yeah, I will say Lohrei definitely has struggled with the forechecking pressure this year. And like you mentioned, he put a pass, like an exit pass off a skate, off of one of the Nashville Predators skates, and then it ends up with that scoring chance, like Scott mentioned, just like not being able to find the right part of the ice to make that pass through. Yeah, and I think we mentioned this last podcast. That's something they continue to work on in practice and try to pressure. Send some good forecheckers in practice to try to pressure those guys. But it definitely doesn't help your offense when you're not transitioning smoothly out of your end and through the neutral zone. So that's creating more issues for. Luckily, you know, your goaltender is Jeremy Swayman, and I thought he saved them a few times. Like there were some really good stops that he made because he had to. And I know it's a 4-0 final score. Well, one of those was an empty net, and I don't think he was necessarily to blame for the other goals either. But sometimes he saves you when you're struggling to get things out of your own end.
Yeah, and the transition game you mentioned, Bridget, like so there's two elements to it. There's the defenseman retrieving pucks in the D zone on dump ins, and then there's the other side where it's just like a neutral zone regroup, and the defense will backpedal. Maybe they're at their own circle, but the opposition's not for checking. They're kind of like neutral zone trapping, or they're line changing, and the Bruins defense have a second to collect themselves. And that's where you see a lot of indecision too. And Hampus Lindholm, there was a play where he literally had like he was at his own circle pretty much, and the nearest Predator was like at center ice. He had nobody on him, and he decided to force a pass up the middle to Marchand, and just like goes through sticks and bodies. And I think it ended up being a non-icing call, but it's like it's very similar to a quarterback making their like assessing their reads. Like if you're a defenseman, take the ice that's given to you. There's no reason to force a pass. If you have time and space, take it. Move your feet. Like the Bruins, they're looking to like, it's like they can only pass it. Who's like no. Take the ice, play hockey. Like go with your instincts. And if you take open ice, you're gonna draw defenders towards you. Okay, well, guess what? Chances are they're flat-footed, so you'll go around them, or they're now leaving their assignment, and now your teammates are open. And at the very least, gain the red line and get it in. But it's like those guys can move, and they're just flat-footed. And overthinking is a phrase you mentioned a little bit ago, Scott, and I that's just exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned like the unwillingness to just go glassing out, and I would add an unwillingness to flip to the neutral zone and fight for it, which I know like Razor would bring this up on Sunday Skate, like down the stretch last year and into the playoffs. It's something that the Florida Panthers do so well. Like the Panthers don't always have clean breakouts. In fact, a lot of times they don't. But they will flip a puck out to the neutral zone and then just win the battle for it and then get into the offensive zone. And it just like doesn't seem to be part of the Bruins system. Like it just seems to be like an absolute last resort for them. And I don't know. I feel like it should be something that they're a little more willing to do. Do they not trust their forwards to win those battles? Like I don't fully get it, but like it's if you have these defensemen who are, as we're saying, like seemingly struggling to find the right pass or make the right pass, it's like that should be on the table because the thing is like, all right, if your forwards aren't back deep enough to offer support and give you a short, simple pass, where they probably are. They're probably in the neutral zone. So, like, put it somewhere where they can go fight for it.
And this is why I would love to be a fly on the wall of a Bruins video session with the coaches, because this is where we just don't have the ability to know, right? Like we don't know what the coaches are preaching. If Jim Montgomery is in a video session and he's pounding his chest, guys, make a play, then that's going to lead to players being like, okay, then I shouldn't go off the glass or I shouldn't flip it high and outside and create puck battles because coach wants us to make a play. And I'm not trying to say that as fact because I just don't know. But if Monty and the coaching staff is telling their players, guys, just get the puck out at all costs, get it out and go after, like get out, then and they're saying that and the Bruins are still being this indecisive, then that's on the players. But if the coaches are saying, guys, make a play. This is 2024 hockey, tape to tape passes, get open, like that's when you start to see players go against their instincts because the game happens so fast. 95% of the time, a player's initial instinct is to not make a play. It's to how do I get the puck out of trouble? And that's how the game should be played. And when you play the game that way, the game opens up because both teams are kind of scrambling. But I wish I knew the answer to that. I wish I knew what the coaches are telling them at Warrior every day at practice. Like, because if they're telling them, Hampus, when you're neutral zone regrouping, we want you to find a body, find a stick. Then I could see why Lindholm is overthinking constantly when he doesn't see that opening. So I just don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I know Montgomery in the past because not this year, but I think last year, like even I asked him something along those lines at some point, and his answer is like what you would expect, which is like we want to come out cleanly with possession, but sometimes you have to just flip it out. But to your point, like what we don't know is like what is that line? Like is it is the flip out like an absolute last resort because you surveyed all your options and there was nothing else, or like can it sometimes be the first option where like I have someone bearing down on me. I know someone's supposed to be, weak side D, but I can't see them. So I'm just going to flip it out. Like, is that okay? Right. Like that's what to your point, like we just don't know.
And I could see somebody having the opinion, Brian, like by flipping the puck off the glass now or flipping the puck into the neutral zone or whatever, you're giving up possession of the puck. But okay, in black and white thinking, that's true in that very moment. But there's something to be said about getting rid of possession of the puck with a head start on regaining that possession, right? Like if you flip the puck out of the zone and your forwards know that like, all right, our D are just going to get like, okay, well, now you got a bouncing puck. You got forwards that know what their defenseman's doing. They get a head start on it. And now you actually do have a better, it's not really a 50-50 battle. Like there are ways to lose possession, but put yourself in a position with a higher probability of regaining it than your opponent. And I think that's what you see teams like Florida do. How often when you watch the Panthers play, do you see Mikkola take the net and throw a dart tape to tape pass to Matthew Tkachuk, who's on the wing, and he does a beautiful one-touch pass to Barkov, and he does a nice saucer pass to Ryan. No, that's not what they do. Like, you play the game in front of you, and you win those battles, but the game moves far too quick to just play the game with tape-to-tape passes. It doesn't work, and teams are too positionally sound to allow it. So you have to make teams vulnerable, and you do that by putting pucks into areas and just where it's away from your net, and go play the game in front of you. And I think that the Bruins just have to start doing that, and I guess we'll see.
Yeah, and also, like, if you lose possession off a neutral zone battle, ideally, like, unless you really put yourself in bad spot, the opponent's not coming back at you with a ton of speed or an odd man rush. Whereas there is no quicker way to give a team an odd man rush than turning it over on the breakout. So, or turning it over on a zone entry, which has also been a problem for the Bruins. So, yeah, like, sometimes mucking it up and just battling is not the worst thing. And it, for a Bruins team that's struggling to make plays, like, it might be what they have to do.
Okay, well, we know that they have a very difficult opponent tomorrow night. I think they're off today, correct, Scott? So they'll go back to work
Wednesday.
They'll have a morning skate, I presume, on Thursday, or maybe not, but they should.
Yeah, they do.
So, Dallas is that's by all accounts going to be should be a Final Four team in the Western Conference this year, and battling for a Stanley Cup or close to it. And the Bruins right now, their personnel is certainly better than what they're showing, and I think their ceiling is a lot higher than what we're seeing. I think we're seeing the Bruins kind of at their floor right now. So let's see what their ceiling is. You don't want to judge a team based on their floor. Let's judge it based on where they can get to. But it's going to take a lot of hard work. So, Bridget and Scott, what are you looking forward to on Thursday against Dallas? And do you expect any lineup changes? And other lineup changes you are looking to see?
First of all, isn't Thursday the first alternative cast, like the Nesson Plus broadcast with Bergeron, Tuca, and Razor? So I'm looking forward to that, seeing how that goes. And I feel like I might stick with that most of the game just to see what it's like. But anyway, besides that, I do think that they move the lines, maybe even put that first line back together, put Marchand back with Coyle. That wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, they can't run out the same lineup that they had last game. I think Jones is probably out. Maybe Brazel's back in. Fourth line probably stays the same. I don't know if you change the D pairs at all. But yeah, I think you probably see them go back to the original first line, which would be putting Zacha back with Lindholm and Pasternak for another try.
Yeah, like, as I kind of alluded to earlier, like, I'm almost just not even interested in, like, what the line combinations are going to be, because at this point, like, I don't think the issue is like, oh, we have the right cast, we just can't figure out the right combinations. Like, I'm interested to see if there is a call up, or if Johnson signed, or like, I kind of feel like you're at a point where you have to do something a little bit more than just moving the same chess pieces around. And like, thinking back to last year where, you had, before you had to make a decision on Padre, you had a 10-game tryout period, and 10th game was when you ended up signing Heinen. Like, I wonder if their plan going in was like, we're going to roll with this roster for 10 games and then see where we're at. But I feel like through 7, you should kind of know, like, this isn't good enough, and it's going to need someone else coming in at some point to try to provide a spark. So I'm interested to see if that happens before Thursday. And if it doesn't, or even if it does, like, regardless, just all the stuff we've been talking about, just want to see if they can actually just play with more urgency and energy, and not be so far off the pace and so sloppy with the puck.
I was just checking my phone to make sure that no one got called up during this recording.
No, Bridget, it will happen the second we stop.
Okay.
So, and Scott, I was hoping to see that after the Utah game. Like, the same narrative was out there and the same challenge. I actually want to get you guys' opinion because I don't really think I got it this clearly. What do you guys make right now of the rapport and just relationship between the coaching and the players right now? Like, how do you guys feel about the players in Montgomery? Like this early in the season, looking this not even like just kind of uninspired a lot of the times. It's not so much that they're losing or it's just what this is the sign of strong coaching. Or let me rephrase: is the sign of a strong coach-player relationship starting the season with some fire behind you, or because it's not encouraging what we've seen so far. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's fascinating because I think by and large the players really like Montgomery. Like I know certainly coming out of last year that was still the feeling about him, and I can't imagine that changed in the course of one preseason or a couple weeks of the season. Like even getting on Marchand, like I think it's still a good relationship in terms of like two-way communication and respect. But yeah, the message definitely doesn't. They don't seem to be doing the things that he wants them to do. So I don't know why or how that disconnect is happening. Like I'm sure people want answers, and so do we. Like I don't have a good theory on it. I don't know why they don't seem to be playing the way that Montgomery keeps preaching.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad relationship. I just think it's not translating. And sometimes, Brian, you said this before. Sometimes, are you flipping me off?
Not intentionally.
Like, okay, I'll
Right.
stop.
Are you flipping me off?
I'm done for today.
I realized what I was doing as you said that. I was like, oh, that looks bad.
So I don't think the relationship is bad. I think just the performances have been bad so far, and I don't think that he's been soft on them. So you can't say it's like, oh, he's not being strong, like being tough enough, or it's not like he's not putting the message out there. It's just that it's not translating with how the players are playing. I don't think that they dislike each other.
No,
If that's what you meant, like getting a vibe check on the relationship, I think it's still
yeah,
pretty good.
yeah. I don't equate it to like not liking them on individual bases, but I will say like Don Sweeney, he said this. He said that they had already began discussions on an extension for Monty. You think at this point, guys, it's probably pencils down?
Yeah, I mean, like, unfortunately, this is what happens when a coach goes into and through a regular season with nothing guaranteed beyond that year. Is any little hiccup, bump in the road, losing streak, you're gonna get those questions of like, is it time to make a change? Because it becomes really easy for ownership to do when there's not a contract lingering over the situation. And it can happen even if there is still a good relationship with the players. Like sometimes the point of a coaching change is just to wake a team up and kind of shock them to life. I don't, to be clear, like I don't think we're there yet. They're 3-3-1. They're middle of the pack with about 26 other teams. Like you have some outliers who are off to great starts and some who are off to awful starts, and like most of the rest of the league is just jumbled into this enormous middle group right now. So for as negative as like we've been, you're not at that point yet. But if this turns into a 3, 4, 5 game losing streak, like it's going to get a lot more uncomfortable, and that's just the reality of having a quote unquote lame duck coach.
And I just want to, come to our own defense and as well as fans and other media members. Like, I don't see this as us being negative. Like, I just see this as us honestly assessing what's in front of us. I mean, to do a podcast 3 times a week and just be like, well, it's a long season, they'll get it together. Like, that's just, first of all, it's letting people off the hook, and it's just, that's just, I don't know. So
Very
I don't
boring.
even see us how about this? Give us something to talk about. Like, give us something positive to talk about. I wish everybody was playing great right now. Wish the middle six was figured out and the defense was lights out and they were playing physical, you know, but and maybe they will give us that reason. But right now it's been a tough start to the season. Keyword start. So all right, any final takeaways, Bridget and Scott, before we go?
No,
not from me.
All right, so expect a episode on Friday, right? Break it down, Bruins Dallas.
Mhm.
All right. Well, everybody, it's you're midway through your week. You're almost there. So keep plugging away. Enjoy Bruins Stars Thursday, and we'll be back on Friday to talk to you. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.